Sharp turn. They're going to try and intercept this now. It didn't look like they got it, and that's a hit.
We are going to destroy their missiles and raise their missile industry to the ground. It will.
Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead following Israeli strikes against his compound and location earlier today.
Then this, a senior Israeli official, no hesitation, no hedging. The supreme leader is dead. Iran's most powerful man, gone. And then this number drops 40 of Iran's top commanders, wiped out, not captured, not wounded, eliminated in a single operation. But here's what nobody is connecting. This wasn't reactive, this wasn't improvised, this was a surgical decapitation years in the making, and the scale of what actually happened in those hours is still being buried under breaking news chyrons and 3-minute phone calls. Stay with me, because the real story is far bigger than the headline. Tel Aviv, Saturday, the sky is on fire. A correspondent is live on a rooftop, and you can hear the missile sirens before he even opens his mouth. Iron Dome interceptors are screaming across the horizon, bright white streaks lighting up the black sky, making sharp, almost impossible turns, racing to catch incoming ballistic missiles before they find their targets. He counts 1 interceptor, 2, then 6. Then he stops counting because the math gets overwhelming. His phone has gone off more than 100 times in 10 minutes alone, each ping a different city, a different community somewhere across Israel, bracing for impact. One missile gets through, a massive plume of smoke rises over the heart of Tel Aviv, a mushroom cloud spreading slowly across a skyline that millions of people call home. The reporter doesn't move. He can't. There wasn't time to go anywhere anyway. But here's the thing the cameras didn't show you while Iran was firing those missiles into Israel. Israel was already inside Iran. 200 Israeli fighter jets, 500 separate target locations, hundreds of munitions dropped in a coordinated wave unlike anything ever conducted by a single air force against a single country. In modern military history, the largest Israeli air operation ever launched, and it wasn't just hitting missile sites or radar installations, it was going straight for the people in charge. Let's slow down on that number, because 40 isn't a statistic, 40 is a strategy. Think about what it takes to run a regime like Iran's. You don't just need a supreme leader at the top, you need layers beneath him. The National Security Council, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, senior military commanders, nuclear program, directors, intelligence chiefs, the people who give the orders, control the weapons, manage the proxies, and keep the entire machine running. Israel didn't just knock the top off this pyramid. According to a senior Israeli official confirming details on the ground, the strikes went through the entire structure. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, killed alongside approximately 40 of his top cohorts, all eliminated in coordinated strikes against their compounds and meeting locations. And here's the piece that makes this feel less like chaos and more like chess. The operation was originally planned to begin at night, but Israeli intelligence got word that senior Iranian leadership, multiple figures, were gathered together, a rare window, a real opportunity. So they contacted the Americans, moved the timeline, and launched, even though it was Shabbat, even though it was Ramadan, because when you have a moment like that, you don't wait for a better calendar date. A retired four-star general with decades of strategic experience described it simply, what a way to begin an operation. And then he said something that should stop you cold. He said Israel has now done this 3 times, 3 separate decapitation operations against 3 separate enemy structures. First, Hezbollah, they took out the entire leadership chain. A Hezbollah general later admitted to him directly, "Sir, we are broken. They have broken our will. Thousands of missiles never fired, not one," because the people with the authority and the nerve to give that order were gone. Then came the 12-day war, where Israel systematically eliminated Iran's senior military commanders and nuclear scientists, degrading an estimated 60% of Iran's retaliatory capability before Iran could even process what was happening. And now this, the 3rd time, the most comprehensive, the most ambitious, aimed not just at the top of the chain, but at the entire infrastructure holding the regime together. While missiles were still in the air, while plumes of smoke were still rising over Tel Aviv, the President of the United States picked up the phone. 3 minutes, that's all it took. When asked directly, has the Supreme Leader been killed? Trump didn't hedge. He didn't say we're assessing. He said, I've spoken to a lot of people. We feel that is a correct story. Then he went further. He said it wasn't just Khamenei. He said a large number of their leaders have also been killed. He said there were 3 separate waves of strikes and that it was in those subsequent attacks that the broader leadership was eliminated. When asked to rate the operation's success on a scale of 0 to 10, he said, "We're close to the 10 spot, if not there." And then this line, the one that matters most, "I think it's already been a success. It would take them years to rebuild." Years, he said, years. That's not a president talking about a limited strike. That's a president describing the gutting of an entire regime's command structure. If you listen carefully to what he didn't say, he didn't promise it was over. He didn't say Iran was defeated. He left the door open deliberately, surgically, the same way his military planners had left their own doors open all day over Iranian airspace, because there's a playbook here, and it was written before the first jet ever left the runway. Here's what the broader media coverage missed in the chaos of the breaking news cycle. The Trump administration had spent months quietly, behind the scenes, trying to reach a diplomatic resolution with Iran. Negotiators were sent to Switzerland. Special envoys made calls. Even Jared Kushner, who had been working across the region for over a year on regional stability and Gaza ceasefire talks, was part of the effort. The ask, according to officials, was actually narrower than you'd expect. The Trump team initially said, "Give us something on the nuclear program. Just that. We'll set aside the ballistic missiles, the proxies, the crackdowns on protesters. Just come to the table on nukes and we'll talk." Iran refused repeatedly, completely, and that refusal was the last domino. Because what Trump reportedly concluded and what his military advisors reinforced was that Iran hadn't learned anything from the 12-day war. They were quietly rebuilding their missile infrastructure. They were funneling money and weapons back to their proxies, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen, to get them back on a path toward attacking Israel again. They were making moves slowly toward reconstituting their nuclear program. The window wasn't closing. It was already closing. So the decision was made by Trump and Netanyahu together, reportedly overnight, to launch not a warning shot, not a targeted strike on one facility, a comprehensive, layered, simultaneous operation designed to destroy the missile industry, annihilate the Navy assets, eliminate the political leadership, and collapse the regime's ability to coordinate any meaningful response. And the Gulf Arab states, the way Bahrain, the GCC nations who had been publicly distancing themselves from any conflict with Iran, their air forces quietly engaged and destroyed over 130 ballistic missiles and more than 200 drones fired at their own territory that day. Suddenly, publicly or not, they were in it. As one strategic analyst put it, if Iran loses its role as the destabilizing force in this region, those Abraham Accords don't just survive, they expand. Saudi Arabia leads the pack. The entire architecture of the Middle East gets redrawn. Now here's the part nobody wants to sit with. 40 commanders killed doesn't mean the war is over. It doesn't even mean Iran stops fighting tomorrow. The ERG, we're told, had already prepared successors' backups for the backups, understanding that in any direct confrontation, the top tier would be the first tier targeted, Iran. Built redundancy into its own survival, so there are names ready to step into those roles. There are people in bunkers who've been waiting for this exact scenario. And Hezbollah, battered, degraded, but not gone, had already issued public warnings that if Iran's supreme leader was targeted, they would enter the war directly, with thousands of rockets still in position, still within range of Israeli cities. The Houthis in Yemen remain, still armed, still capable of anti-ship strikes and long-range ballistic fire. So the question being asked in every intelligence briefing room right now is simple. What does Iran have left to fight with? The honest answer? Less than yesterday, significantly less. Their air defense systems have been systematically targeted. Their missile launchers are being destroyed. Their command and control, the nervous system that tells all of those weapons when and where to fire, has been severed at the top. A regime with its head cut off can still thrash, but it cannot coordinate. It cannot strategize. It cannot respond the way it planned to respond, because the people who wrote the plan are gone. And Trump, even in that 3-minute phone call, was already gesturing toward what he actually wants on the other side of all of this. He said with a hint of sarcasm, he himself acknowledged that whoever replaces the supreme leader will probably call him, that there's a vacuum now, and that the Iranian people themselves have a moment A rare, fleeting, historically significant moment to seize something different. Here's where we land. What happened in those hours wasn't just a military operation. It was a message sent simultaneously to Tehran, to Beijing, to Moscow, to every state actor watching to see whether America and its allies still had the nerve to act decisively when the moment demanded it. 40 commanders, the supreme leader, the nuclear program's architects. The military infrastructure, the ballistic missile sites, taken apart layer by layer in a single coordinated campaign that military analysts are already calling one of the most brilliantly executed operations in modern warfare. And it was done because diplomacy ran out of road, because the other side kept saying no, and because the people making decisions in Washington and Jerusalem looked at the trajectory at a regime rebuilding its weapons, rearming its proxies, defying every off-ramp offered, and decided the cost of waiting was higher than the cost of acting. Whether this ends in days or weeks, whether a successor regime emerges that's willing to negotiate, whether the Iranian people use this vacuum to demand something new, none of that is settled yet. But the 40 commanders are gone, the supreme leader is gone, and the Middle East that existed 48 hours ago no longer exists. The question isn't what just happened. The question is what gets built in the space where Iran's regime used to stand. That answer is still being written.